Most people have absolutely no idea what's really going on behind those viral clips and punchlines you see on social media or cable news. They watch a short video of the president looking like he's nodding off during a cabinet meeting, and late-night hosts go crazy, memes explode, everyone laughs. Then they hear that one of his top defense officials is accused of giving what sounds like a horrifying kill everybody order on a battlefield, and they think, wow, that guy's a monster. Case closed. But here's the thing. What you're about to discover flips that whole picture upside down. These aren't two completely separate stories. They're pieces of a single playbook, a coordinated set of moves designed to shape reality, to control whose version of events dominates the news cycle, the court of public opinion, and ultimately political outcomes. That viral nap clip, not just a meme, the battlefield scandal, not just a shocking headline, put them together with the legal fights over tariffs and the administration's push to control SNAP data, and a pattern emerges: distraction, delegitimization, escalation, and normalization of hard power. The board has tilted, but probably not in the direction you think. Let's break down what actually happened, stripped of the noise and the memes. A short clip from a White House cabinet meeting showing President Trump appearing to close his eyes went viral almost instantly. Opponents, governors, and the media were quick to amplify it, and suddenly the old sleepy narrative was back in the headlines. That alone could dominate the conversation for days. Meanwhile, reporting emerged about Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who has been formally scrutinized for using signal chats to discuss the timing and details of military operations. In one thread, a journalist was accidentally included, which Pentagon investigators flagged as risky for both personnel and operations. Separately, reporting alleges that Hegseth gave a spoken order during a September 2nd operation to kill everybody, and a follow-up so-called double-tap strike reportedly killed survivors. These allegations have sparked bipartisan concern and prompted further investigation. At the same time, the administration faced a major legal challenge on the corporate front. Costco filed a suit seeking refunds for tariffs imposed under presidential emergency authority, arguing that the administration had exceeded its statutory power. If the courts side with Costco, the president could be forced to refund trillions in duties, creating a politically explosive situation. And domestically, the USDA threatened to withhold SNAP administrative funding from states that refused to hand over detailed recipient data. Critics argue that this is political weaponization of food assistance. Courts have already enjoined parts of this demand, but the threat remains very much in play, and it was explicitly mentioned during that same cabinet meeting where the viral nap clip originated. All of this is high-stakes machinery, not random reporting. The names, the dates, and the legal hooks matter. Trump, Hegseth, Brooke Rollins, Costco, the September 2 strike, late November reporting, the early December cabinet meeting, Pentagon IG findings, the Court of International Trade lawsuits. These are real events with real consequences, and the details are the mechanics of how influence and control are being exerted. To understand what's really happening, you have to look at the patterns behind the events and the constraints shaping decisions. Character history matters. Trump has spent years weaponizing optics, relentlessly attacking opponents' stamina and fitness while denying his own vulnerabilities. The team that built Sleepy Joe understood how to collapse complex arguments about stamina into a single shareable meme. Now that same strategy is being flipped back on him, but that flip is itself a political tool, not a mistake. Pete Hegseth is not a neutral bureaucrat either. He came from media, cultivated a public identity as an aggressive, unvarnished warrior, and built a personal brand around decisive, tough action. When a subordinate operation crosses legally gray lines like the double-tap strikes, the optics are explosive because they align with his established persona and implicate the chain of command. Legal and institutional constraints also matter. The Pentagon has strict communication rules, and the law of armed conflict sets specific legal boundaries. Using signal for mission-critical details, even if not classified, violates safeguards intended to prevent leaks and protect personnel. At the same time, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act is being actively litigated. The Supreme Court has already expressed skepticism about presidential tariff authority, which means there's a real check on executive action. Timing pressure compounds these constraints. The nap clip went viral precisely when the administration needed to control narrative momentum between ongoing court hearings on tariffs and the Pentagon watchdog's disclosures. SNAP controversies and Hegseth fallout were hitting at the same moment. That compressed window creates the perfect environment for coordinated narrative operations. There's also precedent here. Governments often mix spectacle, legal gambits, and administrative coercion to distract attention while normalizing harder policies. Think of it like a sequence. First, delegitimize opponents with a meme. Next, litigate in sympathetic or favorable forums. Then, operationalize force while reframing the story as necessary and unavoidable. In other words, this isn't chaotic, it's constrained, predictable, and readable, which makes it exploitable for strategic advantage. So what's really happening beneath the surface? The question isn't whether Trump looked sleepy or whether Hegseth crossed the legal line. The real question is whether these events were ever intended to be resolved on their own, or whether they were bait in a larger strategy where optics, legal pressure, and military posture are used in parallel to shift the political battlefield. Here's the controversial insight nobody is saying out loud. An apparent scandal or embarrassment can be a strategic asset if it's managed correctly. Think about this strategically. If you're running communications and operations for the administration, you know 3 key constraints. First, courts can check executive power, like with tariffs. Second, watchdogs and the press will surface damaging headlines, like with Hegseth. Third, public sympathy is fragile on bread and butter issues like food stamps. But you also have a major advantage: control over immediate levers, press rooms, cabinet meetings, aggressive lawfare, and operational secrecy in the Pentagon. At that point, you have 2 choices. Path A is the obvious one: retreat. Admit a misstep on Hegseth, let the courts hammer tariffs, and back down on SNAP. That might preserve moral high ground, but it sees momentum and looks weak. Path B is the 4D chess option: lean into each controversy in a way that generates 4 compound wins. First, distract and reframe the narrative. Let the viral nap clip dominate headlines for 48 to 72 hours. Op-eds and cable debates will obsess over stamina, age, and optics, consuming attention that might otherwise dwell on complex legal or moral issues around a military strike. It's cheap, shareable, and emotionally engaging, a perfect way to capture public focus. Second, normalize aggression while pre-justifying it. Frame Hegseth's conduct as warrior realism, the strike as a necessary action against narco-terrorism. When the public is primed to see lethal force as unavoidable, the conversation narrows to legality rather than morality. That subtle shift protects future operations and sets precedent for muscular tactics going forward. Third, weaponize administrative authority to put opponents on the defensive. Threaten to cut SNAP funding to states that don't comply with data demands. This forces governors and courts to litigate in public while families worry about benefits. Critics are framed as either protecting fraud or protecting privacy. The net effect is draining political capital from opposition players. Fourth, fuse legal and political pressure to undercut judicial remedies. By accelerating appeals on tariff authority while filing lawsuits to lock in refund rights, the administration creates a dilemma for courts: choose constitutional doctrine or economic chaos. If courts rule against them, the administration can still spin it as judicial overreach, rally the base, and prepare legislative countermeasures. Look at the language used in public statements. After Hegseth reporting, officials defended the operation as lawful and cited fog of war. After the nap clip, aides stressed that the President Abiy was listening attentively. These aren't words of defeat, they're words of control and delay. Meanwhile, while everyone focused on the viral clip or Hegseth, 3 other things were happening: the Costco lawsuit, legal filings around SNAP, and cable news messaging, framing it all as partisan theater. Coincidence? Or coordination? The narrative cascade is clear. The opposition amplifies a video. The administration pivots to framing and lawfare. Simultaneous administrative threats and lawsuits exert pressure, and the media cycle shifts from accountability to constitutional chaos and policy trade-offs. By the end of it, opponents are reacting on 3 fronts simultaneously. That's not reactive politics, that's offensive strategy. So what comes next? Short term, in the next 30 to 90 days, expect the administration to double down on the warrior framing for Hegseth. He'll be publicly defended as exercising decisive authority, with classified briefings narrowly controlled. Signal findings will be reframed as procedural errors. The nap clip narrative will be met with counterclips showing the president at rallies or working late. The goal is to burn off outrage by reframing it. Medium term, 3 to 6 months out, litigation will be the main battlefield. Costco's suit and others pressing for tariff refunds will push toward clarified rulings. If courts rule IEPA misuse illegal, the administration will face a choice: comply and refund political hemorrhage, or defy the court's constitutional crisis. Expect contingency messaging blaming courts and Congress while using regulatory delay and settlements to limit financial fallout. Long term, 6 to 12 months out, watch for a legislative and administrative package framed as national security reforms anti-smuggling enforcement will be tightened, surveillance permissions for welfare programs expanded, and new narrow military authorities codified. This incremental approach will coincide with distracting headlines, giving the administration cover while quietly building real power. And there's a wild card. A whistleblower or leak could surface indisputable evidence, maybe audio of a strike order. If that happens, legal and political calculations shift fast. Opposition forces could unify, Republicans worried about legality might distance themselves, and the administration would have to adapt quickly. But the bet is on public attention spans being short and formal inquiries being slow. The deeper trend is clear. This isn't a bunch of unrelated scandals. It's an acceleration of a political style that treats legal jeopardy as a cost of doing business and uses spectacle, messaging, and administrative coercion to offset that cost. Success is about momentum, legal posture, and controlling the tempo of attention. So what does this mean for you? Power in complex systems isn't about winning every moral argument. It's about controlling the narrative, setting the rhythm, and turning setbacks into advantages. What looks like a presidency under fire is actually a coordinated effort to turn every apparent scandal into an offensive tool. It's political jujitsu. Use opponents' outrage as momentum, litigation to create uncertainty, and administrative authority to impose costs. It's messy, it's ruthless, and it's effective. Whether you find it inspiring or terrifying depends on your values, but you can't deny it works. The final perspective, do you see chaos and an out-of-control leadership, or do you see a team turning apparent setbacks into advantage? The side that controls attention controls options. Despite viral clips and damning headlines, one side is playing offense, forcing opponents to react across media, courts, and administration simultaneously. The opposing coalition is still organizing its response, drafting legal briefs, and managing outrage. Who sets the rhythm over the next 6 months will shape the next chapter of American politics. And when courts finally rule on tariffs, or evidence about battlefield strike surfaces, will the strategy collapse? Or will the administration have already cashed in enough narratives, delays, and institutional changes to survive whatever judgment comes down? The outcome will define the political tempo for the next chapter.